Welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview podcast. The international break is over and the lads are back, hoping to make it 5 wins on the spin. What a sentence that actually is to say. Can we do it? Well, I've roped in one of my ultimate favourite guests to let us know in the shape of Ben from Plymouth's Green and White podcast. You're not going to be as happy as I am, mate, but how are you doing anyway?
Yeah, I am delighted. Always a pleasure and a privilege to be on with you, Gray. I can honestly say my favourite Scotland-based Sunderland supporting journalist.
I mean, I'll take the compliment. I don't know how many there is, but I'll take it nonetheless. Look, there's tons to dig into, like loads to dig into, because things have changed. As it feels like it always does in the Championship, but we always start in the same place. Before the international break, you had a 1-0 defeat at home to Stoke, which I've wrote here as stroke, just to let everyone know the behind the scenes. I know we'll come on to managers soon, but that aside, and the fact that it was a former manager in X, Y, and Z, how was the performance?
Um, the performances have improved steadily throughout the season, which is worrying because we still conceded 90 shots out over 4 games, and we still look vulnerable at the back and not clinical in the. Well, I say not clinical actually. Like, for example, the Stoke game, the XG on target was actually better than the XG. So the players were hitting the target with very little sort of chances. But they're just not good chances. Whereas Stoke had the same number of shots, but like Manhoef had 3 one-on-ones, just him alone. So the quality of chances we're producing just aren't brilliant. I mean, you could argue that we could have got something out of the game, but I think the quality of Stoke's chances merited the win. It is good that we are improving, but the fact that we're still playing a system that doesn't suit the squad we've got is a worry. Should that have been addressed in free agency and in the transfer window? We had supposedly quite a bit of money to spend and didn't quite fill the positions that needed it the most. But yeah, it was a bit of a disappointing result, despite the fact that we looked good up until we got to the box. I don't think, it wasn't good enough to beat Stoke. I don't think anyone could really argue that we deserve to win, maybe that we deserve to get something. So I very much doubt it's going to be good enough for Sunderland on Saturday.
Famous last words. I'm tempted no
Yeah, well,
famous.
that's the thing, isn't it? We all know as football fans, these are the ones that just sort of go the other way for some weird reason. But that's more out of hope than faith that I say that.
We'll come on to Rooney and Schumacher, because Rooney's obviously going to be an interesting thing, an important thing to speak about. But it's not been a crap start of the season, but you haven't won a game yet. And then your ex-manager comes along and kind of takes a 1-0 win at your own ground. If morale was low before that, I imagine that has added to it. So did the international break come at a good time for you in that sense? Or do you prefer to play a game, kind of get it out your system?
It's a weird one. So like Rooney went to Manchester to play in the Legends game. I think you've probably seen the lovely free kick he bent in the top corner. It's quite funny because in pre-season he was saying how Adam Randall takes a better free kick than he ever did. And we all sort of looked sideways and sort of said, pull the other one. And then Randall hasn't scored a free kick or looked close to scoring one all season. He goes away with his belly in his grey hair and bends one in the top corner from 25 yards out in a friendly. Didn't do much for the pressure on Adam Randall to sort of do the same sometime soon. So he went away. The players have gone away. It's a weird one. The manager's been seen out sort of in the pub regularly and doing karaoke and stuff. So there's kind of a vibe that maybe things aren't being taken as seriously as maybe they could be. And so the international break could have been an opportunity to say, lads, I'm really sorry, but you're not going on holiday. Let's work on some nuts and bolts, especially as there's a deadline day signing of a number 10 or an attacking midfielder number 10 in Rami Al-Hajj, who is going to be really pivotal to this formation working or not. It was a good opportunity to maybe do something, but obviously, the players had their plans. Rooney had his prior engagement. So I think more than anything, rather than it being like the result festering or nice to just sort of take your mind off Argyle for a bit, it's actually been a little bit more the spotlight on some of the circus around the club, which we've never had before. Like I say, we'll come on to it, but we are, even at this level, a small club, and we've not sort of used to the national spotlight and etc. So, yeah, it's been a bit of a weird international break. It will be nice to get back to the football, even though, kind of dreading what's coming.
We do need to get on to Rooney, and I am keep saying the word Rooney and Schumacher on X, Y, and Z, but there's a small matter of the fact that the last time we played, I actually asked the same question about this new manager. We'd just got Michael Beale in. You had him just coming in, Ian Foster. So we'll quickly go back to last term. From my memory, he lasted slightly longer than Beale, I think an extra 5 games. He won 1 in 12 in his last 12 games. He didn't score a goal at home, I think, in his last 5.
Yeah.
I feel like I've answered this question before I ask it, but why did the appointment of Ian Foster go so badly?
The club, I think, has basically rolled sixes for quite a long time in lots of different areas, both recruitment, appointments. Lowe came in, Schumacher succeeded him. They both did really well for the club. And I wonder if they got a little bit too clever and went for sort of like a data appointment, someone out of the England system. You'd seen lots of those guys, Steve Cooper, Rob Edwards, succeed. And maybe just thinking, we're onto something smart here. And to be fair to him, does have the credentials. He kind of came in, I think, and tried to treat the seasoned pros like he treated the youth age groups, and sort of maybe ruled with an iron fist that wasn't necessary. Ruffled a few feathers. And basically, his style of football was brilliant if you have the best players. It's kind of like you'd lock up the game if you have the best players. Like his England team, I think, won the World Cup or the Euros with sort of like 22 goals scored, 2 conceded or something. It's great if you've got the best players on the pitch. It's a kind of steady and safe style of football. You move the ball around, you keep possession, you pounce when you create the overloads. Doesn't work when you haven't got the best players on the pitch. You move the ball around, you get caught on the press eventually. You turn the ball over. When you get possession further up, people just put you in a low block and you don't go anywhere. And he wasn't adaptable. So yeah, it went wrong because his philosophy was a little bit inappropriate for the squad that we had. Ironically, after with the appointment of Rooney, the club said they introduced personality tests as part of the recruitment process, which I think tells you something about the problems that went on with the appointment of Foster. It wasn't purely a systemic or a tactical problem, but there seems to have been quite a few problems within the dressing room, within the squad, and between the manager and staff. So yeah, I think there's multiple facets to the failure, but it certainly was severe when they all came together.
Funny, I remember when Beale got appointed and you were like, oh no, I'm so sorry. And then
Yeah.
I seen Wayne Rooney got appointed for you and I was like, oh no, Ben, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, I think he didn't have a great time at DC United. The Birmingham City situation was, first and foremost, maybe not his fault that Eustace didn't deserve to be sacked, but he didn't come in and make it any better. To cut a long story short, he was absolutely shite. Like, his Birmingham team last year was one of the worst teams I've seen at the stadium, and we weren't playing badly at the time, but we weren't as fluent as we would have liked to have been last season, and his team was really, really poor. Then he kind of lands on this Plymouth Argyle job, and I was like, what is on that for? What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was that it was horrible, and the data bears that out. But it was compounded more by the chairman put out a video to sort of address concerns, and a lot of the stuff he said wasn't. It was either severely misleading or completely inaccurate. And so that's made it even worse, really. Now, I can't blame, I don't have a problem with Wayne Rooney. The guy applied for a job. You can't blame him for doing that. It's on the board to make the right call. And I don't think they have. The problem was for example, the chairman said at Birmingham he was required to play a certain style of football. Well, actually, if you listen to the interviews, including like he did a stick to football with Gary Neville, a few weeks after he got sacked, and he said in that, when I came into Birmingham, me and the board and everything, we were all aligned in our thinking on how to play. And my only regret is that I didn't get a transfer window to sort of try and bring in what I needed to play that way. So he wasn't required to play a style of football. It was the style of football he wanted to play. And if he'd adapted slightly, if he'd flexed a little bit to what he had been equipped with, which is what Eustace did, wasn't it? Let's be fair. He looked at the strengths of the squad and set it up accordingly. If Rooney had been willing to do that and picked up a few more points, he'd have probably kept his job. Because, I know Tony Mowbray was very briefly in charge and he is quite an expansive, I'm a big fan of Tony Mowbray's football. Um, but he is more of a pragmatic head than people give him credit for. He'll do what needs to be done. And then of course, Rowett was a bit of a desperation appointment. But if they're willing to do that, Rooney could quite easily have said, "Look, I need to adapt and adjust," but he didn't want to. The worry is, and there's a similar story at DC United and at Derby from fans. The biggest or the most consistent criticism through all his tenures has been that he's systemically and tactically inflexible. So the worry is he's come in, he's implemented a system that doesn't seem to be suiting our squad. Is he going to learn from his past mistakes and actually do what he didn't do at Birmingham and adjust to what he's got? Trouble is now we've brought in an attacking midfielder who should at least open up some opportunities up top. So he's going to have at least a couple of months trying to bed him in, you imagine. It's just mad. Like, we're playing the same 4-2-3-1 that he did at Birmingham, although that wasn't, I think, the original plan looking at pre-season. And his Birmingham scored on average one goal a game and conceded two. And before and after, they only conceded one. I think after him it was 1.02. So just defensive frailties to that system. If you don't have the players to play it, you need two holding midfielders. Your double pivot needs to be able to be mobile to cover the fullbacks that have gone up. Otherwise, you're left with a narrow two centre backs, two midfielders, and the flanks are open. Or if you've not got very mobile defensive midfielders, the centre's open. We've only got one of those in the whole squad. So we're basically playing our best combination would probably be Adam Randall, who's a decent championship player, and then Darko JB on loan from Leeds, who is athletic, but doesn't necessarily have the range of passing that you'd want and the quickness of thought, or who's out injured, Caleb Roberts, just come up from the youth side. So we are looking frail defensively, and I wonder what the board was thinking when they interviewed, by all accounts, Paul Heckingbottom, and other available, and that doesn't tell the whole story. There might have been reasons he might have wanted to come down. Might have wanted more money or something, but Rooney's record speaks for itself, and beyond his record, the flaws are very apparent. There are often mitigating circumstances, but Rooney's stylistic. Like Birmingham came down to us, they were 3-1 up. All they had to do was shut up shop, and they just carried on playing the same way, and we ended up drawing 3-3. That was, Rooney's Birmingham. They wanted them to play a certain way. There wasn't any sort of and I kind of feel like we might go a similar way. So, where did the appointment come from? It apparently impressed an interview, and they liked the sort of talk of the style of football he sold them. My question would then be, well, did anybody at any point ask the director of football, do we have the squad to play this style of football, or speak to Jimmy Dickinson, the head of recruitment, and say, do you think we'll be able to get in enough people with the budget that we've got, etc., to be able to fit to make this work? I mean, maybe they thought they could, and they didn't come out that way. We're not the most attractive proposition for players coming in, but it was a risk to roll those dice. If you think, well, yeah, okay, we need to get 6 or 7 players in, but we can do this and give him the squad he needs. Well, we're Plymouth Argyle. You're sort of really backing yourself to be able to get that many players in of the necessary quality to give him the tools to do it. And even then, are you convinced that that's the style of football that's going to work best for a lower half team at best? So lots of questions in the appointment process, and they're yet to be answered on the pitch. He has managed to get his philosophy over to the players. They look like they know what they're supposed to be doing. He just looks like he's asking players to do stuff they can't physically do or that isn't in their skill sets. I mean, John Roddy talked about his time at Birmingham and said he's just asking players to do stuff that they can't do, and he doesn't seem to understand that they can't do it because he was such a physically gifted player, could basically play a bit like Steven Gerrard. He could have played left back, he could have played right back, he could have probably played centre back, he could have played, Rooney is that sort of that type. And he just wasn't understanding why the Birmingham players just literally couldn't do it. He's like, just do this. And they're like, we can't. And it's quite funny listening to John Roddy explain that. And I kind of feel like there's a bit of that going on again down here, that he's sort of, lads, you two do this and then it'll be fine. And it's like, well, that only works if I'm as fast as the guy making fast as the runner. If I'm not as fast as the free runner, then they're going to arrive in the box unimpeded. So it doesn't matter if I'm trying or not. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding, but we've had inverted commas easier start to the season and picked up, what is it, 2 points. Now we're facing your mob, West Brom, Luton. So it's, unless we get one of those fluky jammy results, which will paper over cracks, it looks like we could be potentially adrift almost by Christmas, if not before. So yeah, it's early doors. You can't make too many, sweeping conclusions, but it's not looking pretty.
Just imagine him like screaming at someone like Janine Bakuna, being like, "Just score the overhead kick, just score just you just arch your back like that." I'm not naturally talented. Just do it. Just do it. Sorry,
Very
Wayne,
much.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
You've kind of answered the question in a way, but I remember when we got Beale. Sorry, Sunderland fans. And everyone kind of went, "Oh," but then you kind of go, "All right, he's here. We'll get behind him." That's because
Yeah.
that's what we do. That's what we do. And then like 3 games in, you go, "Fuck, fuck, fuck." Um, and
It's
then
all coming true.
yeah, then you go, maybe I do know things about football. Maybe I have read this story before.
Yeah.
Um, he won the game in the cup, and he has picked up 2 draws. One of those draws being with 10 men. And I know you don't want to write anyone off after 4 games, but you mentioned before about Rooney's record. Now, that would be my concern with Rooney, is that there's mitigating circumstances at a lot of clubs he's been at, but the end result has been the same and ended in a very similar fashion. As a fan base, and I know you can't speak for every fan, but from your judgment from going to games and speaking to fans, is there a concern that the Rooney appointment's going to go the way that maybe people expected it to go?
Yeah, there is. I mean, the fan base is quite split. The vast majority, even if they're like for myself,
That's the worst part, isn't it, when it's split? It's
yeah,
like it's the
yeah,
one thing you don't want. It's better to be like just everyone hating someone and then moving
yeah.
on, or everyone loving someone, because obviously that's unity. I think when it's split, bizarrely, that can be one of the worst things because it's just infighting and it's awful. I hate that in the fan base.
Yeah, we
Um,
had that with Foster, and I think that's maybe the reaction to that is that folks are trying that. That's a bit West Country, isn't it? Folks are trying to all get behind him. They are. Um, I think like because we're used to being like out on a limb down here, and no one takes us seriously. Getting a manager in that same mold has kind of galvanized even those of us like myself who think it's going to go horribly wrong. I'll give him a chance to get behind him because it's always us against the world. We're always seen as you know interlopers into the championship. Everyone sort of the number of clubs who say, "Oh, you won your cup final," etc. When we've beaten them on the because we're just one of those clubs that people look down their noses at, and we love nothing more than bloody in the noses that everyone's looking down at us. So, kind of getting a manager who himself is trying to prove people wrong, prove a point, um, re rehabilitate his image and his reputation, kind of fits our identity to a certain degree. But I mean, that only goes so far in terms of what you can accept. With you and Beale, it's sort of like he'd had enough rope, you think, and he'd hung himself with it already. And yet, sort of Sunderland came along and hoisted him up and said, "Hang on, lad, get down. We'll give you one more shot." And I feel like that's kind of where for whatever reason, the board plumped with him. They plumped with him, and it's them I feel that's getting off a bit scot free because Rooney's Rooney. His limitations are his limitations, and you can't blame him for that. He's doing what he can do, but the board I feel should be the ones carrying the can here. At the minute, everyone's still it's early days, and he'll get until we're cut adrift. My worry is we've played some nice football up until the final third. It's at least attractive to the eye, even if we're not creating much. Like you say, there's been a few gutsy performances, and we like, all fans like to see their teams fighting. Will he get a sneaky win here, a draw against a big team there, and just prolong the agony too long until finally it becomes inevitable, but it's too late to right the ship? Mixing my metaphors there. But yeah, that's the worry. I mean, I feel like 50% of the fan base thinks it's going to go wrong, 50% think it could all come right, and then sort of like 75%, 25% of the folks who think it's going to go wrong have joined the 50 positive percent and are just getting behind the team anyway. I think there's a silent 25% at the minute who aren't really behind him and the team, but are keeping silent because of not wanting to be, shouted down and told off. But I think the majority of people are supportive, if not positive. And I think there's 50-50 on the positivity, and blows my mind why people are. It's just sort of blind hope to me. But I think some people are positive, but I think the most of us are at least supportive, even if we sort of think the writing's on the wall. We'll just sort of keep cheering and supporting in it out of hope because that's who we are that's our kind of our identity really. You just don't want us to become the laughing stock that everyone already kind of sees us as. We'd sort of filled that niche as a well-run club punching above our weight, and to then appoint Ian Foster, have to sack him, just survive by the skin of our teeth, and then appoint Wayne Rooney. It's kind of like we're beginning to look like the country bumpkin oafs that sort of Argyle have always had the reputation of being. And it's a shame, really, when the board has done so well for a good number of years to keep putting their foot in it repeatedly of late.
Suppose the one thing both clubs have got in common is that both of our managers that we quite liked at the time thought Stoke was a better place to live. So there is that. What do you make of Schumacher's move? Because I honestly thought, because I suppose just for balance towards the board, I guess you could say that like the Schumacher thing was kind of the rug from under their feet, if we're going to go with analogies and stuff. But I remember when Alex Neil went, similar situation, really. Bizarrely decided to go, no offense to Stoke, but I mean, obviously he was wrong. It hasn't worked out. But I thought, you know what, he's a good manager. He'll do well with Stoke because Stoke have, in my lifetime, predominantly been top half Championship, Premier League for a long, long time. I thought he's tactically away. He'll do all right. And he didn't. He was an absolute shambles at Stoke, which is probably one of the only times he has been. And he's struggling to get back into work now because of it. I know they won the last game, but I don't think Schumacher's doing anything necessarily fantastic. And I think, the podcast that we do, we all follow each other's pages and stuff. And I do see the Stoke fans being like, ugh. Do you think, looking back, it was the right move for him?
I mean, he'll be earning a lot more. And it depends what your priorities in life are. I said it.
So, yes.
I famously said at the time, I don't think he'd be daft enough to take the poison chalice and set his career back several years, because if he stayed at Argyle, did continue to do well, he could then have he wants to be the Everton manager one day, but he certainly could have had a pop at a lower Premier League or certainly higher, recently relegated Championship team, as in recently, Premier League relegated. He could have had a real go at a good top job. His star was rising. However, you'd never know what's going to happen, do you? And he might have thought, things might go wrong at Plymouth. We don't know how things were going behind the scenes. There was talk of discord between him and the director of football. So, we don't know the ins and outs of that. It might have been he just wanted to get out of the place. It might have been he thought he saw the writing on the wall and realised that what we all thought was great management, what we've now seen with the club appointing a couple of duff managers, that everything's not as clever behind the scenes as we thought, and he thought, well, this is about as good as it's going to get. I'll get out while the going's good. Or it might just be that he thought it could all go pear shaped. This is my only opportunity to go and chase the bag, as they say. Or he might have just backed himself and have the confidence that I'm the man who can turn it around where everyone else has failed, which, fair play to him because there's been a lot more experienced men than him gone in there and absolute, turned a pig's ear into another pig's ear. So I don't know quite why you went. I mean, like I say, he'll get a payoff either way if he does get the sack. I very much doubt he's done enough to damage his reputation that he won't be able to get another mid-level championship sort of gig. If Preston came calling or sort of maybe a Cardiff or someone, if he was out of work, I think that he'd be able to make a good fist of an interview for those sort of jobs. So. Um, Maybe it was the right move. I do sort of feel like, there's no romance in football, unfortunately, and it would have been nice for him to stay. Like I say, I think if he'd backed himself to get a top job eventually, it'd have been better staying at Argyle. But, you know, Stoke did better than Argyle last season, just about, and they're certainly doing better than us this season. So, um, by that, I mean, it's not as weird a move as Neil going. Neil went from a big club to another big club, in terms of the division. Well, in terms of football at all, he went from a bigger club, really. Sunderland, in terms of history and support, etc., are a bigger club. But just financials, maybe at the minute is Stoke. You could argue might be meatier, but that's a very different proposition to going from Plymouth to Stoke. That's definitely a step up. One would argue, I think, in most ways. He's gambled, hasn't he? That's ultimately what it is. It's a gamble. It's a fast track if it works. If he's the one who turns Stoke around, or at least gets them, sort of out of the doldrums, then that again, his star keeps rising. But it seems to have stalled a little. I think I agree with you.
No, sort of modern day. From what I can see, I haven't watched all the games, obviously, but one of your big positives has been the goalkeeper, Connor Hazard, who obviously was up here with Celtic previously, like very sporadically in terms of playing. But to just bring the negativity back and make us feel a bit more positive again, he's knackered, isn't he? He's
Yeah,
injured. He's
you were
dead.
saying about sort of like the good results we've been able to pull out in the league. Well, he's like prevented 3.2 goals in the league or something. We could the XG we conceded against Wednesday in that first Sunday game of the season was more than
Ah,
anyone produced last season in any game in the championship. So yeah, he's in the form of his career. He's had a bit of a weird career down here. He didn't do too badly when he first started. Went back out when Michael Cooper gained fitness, and then when he came back in when Cooper injured himself again for a second stint last year, he was a bit worse. I don't know if it was the time out, but he's literally in the best form of his time down here. Um, Out commanding his box better, quicker on with the book distribution, etc., which was the complaints because his shot stopping's never been an issue. Yeah, then he's gone and crocked himself. Now we have brought in Dan Grimshaw for like 600k or whatever it was, from Blackpool, and he had a bit of a blinder in the cup after an absolute howler. Um, I think he probably was still our man of the match, ironically, despite the howler he conceded. So he should be able to step in and do a good job. But it's how much it's the old cliche about the familiarity between the keeper and his centre back pairing, etc. So it would have been nice. Would have been nice to have Hazard in goal, and he would have started. I think it would have been absolutely no chance that you couldn't have dropped him in the form he was in. So yeah, probably a little bonus for you. But Grimshaw should be an able deputy, and it gives him that chance to come in. He was brought in to do that. I think he was brought in to be the number one. So I don't think it will be too much of a drop off, really.
I said he was dead there, by the way. He's not. He's got an ankle injury. He's
Figuratively
not.
speaking.
He's not dead. In case anyone's wondering, he's not. It's an ankle injury, I think.
Me being quite flippant about it as well. It's like,
There was part of me
don't
that was like,
regain his place.
there's part of me that was like, Ben, please notice so I don't have to correct myself. In case anyone's like, oh my God, what happened? Looking at Sunderland, it's funny because obviously we've stayed in touch pretty much since the first show we did. When you had purple lips, for people who remember that. If you don't, it's an in-joke that you'll never understand. And I feel like oddly, the game against Plymouth last year, when people tell me, especially at the start of the season, they go, explain why Mowbray got sacked in X, Y, and Z and where things
Mm,
went wrong or what went wrong last season. I always refer back to the Plymouth away game. And people go, well, he got sacked after the Millwall game. But for me, Plymouth was the moment the board kind of went, hang on a minute. Because we absolutely battered you. Like, we played so well. And I think after about half an hour, you went, we're not scoring today. It's going to be one of those games. And it was like the last of like a run of games where we'd done that away from home, especially. And then the game against Millwall, we were just quite poor and actually did score from the penalty spot and got away with it. Um, the home game was weird because the home game we actually were okay first half and then played really well second half and scored two absolute screamers. Clarkey with a brilliant goal as per and kind of Job doing a bit of a Jude impression for a point. I think he just came on and bizarrely a Michael Beale win. So you kind of seen the best of Sunderland under Mowbray, but maybe the reason he potentially was moved on. And then you saw this kind of weird Michael Beale win where we were
To be
still
fair,
kind
we
of a
were
bit
more
like,
concerned about we were more concerned about the Foster ball than the anything Beale was doing at that point.
I think that
It
might
was,
have had
I think
something to
it was
do
a
with it.
perfect storm of weirdness going on in that match.
I think because of the way things went, people didn't expect us to have as bad a start to the end of we as bad a start this season as the end that we did have last season. But I don't think people expected us to do as well as we have done so far. I didn't. And I'm relatively confident that we were going to do fairly well this season. But from the outside looking in, it feels like a lot of people are absolutely shocked. You've seen some really interesting versions of something last season. Has it surprised you how we've done?
It's really weird because the end of the last season just seemed to just be a descent into ennui. Like, just seemed like, well, I mean, I didn't see many of the games, but just seeing the results and the stats, it's like, do the lads just not care? Have they just like gone on a holiday 3 months early or something? It was really bizarre because, I'm a big fan of a lot of the players at Sunderland. Trey Hume, I think, is one of the best fullbacks in the division. '09, I think, is a very underrated player. You've got, there's so many players there who I think you are what Argyle want to be, really, sort of like bringing through players, acquiring players, slyly, cleverly, and building a squad that's much bigger than the sum of its, better than the sum of its parts, while still having quality players. They're not just sort of, you're not taking a chance. They're good, but they're even better when you get them to work together. So if anything, I feel like you've kind of probably, what's the expression? Like returning to the mean, as it were. Like you were so bad at the end of last season, you're now having a blinding start, and then eventually maybe you will taper off a little bit. But I feel like kind of this was due almost because of you were just. I kept thinking, oh, Sunderland will win this week, and you just kept not winning, or it was, and you just, if the season had gone on much longer, you'd have probably ended up in some kind of trouble if because the bottom teams were all of a sudden hitting. I think Wednesday, QPR or Sunderland. I think they lost like Sunderland, Stoke. They lost like one of the last 8 or 9. It's bizarre your form at the end of the season for the squad you've got. And I know it's a caretaker. I know there's a lot of caveats going in there. You've had several managers, and so it's a bit weird. I didn't expect the start that you've had, and it's not just the results. I think you've got to acknowledge the way the team's playing. The manager deserves props for that, because that's obviously integral. It's not just the same players turning up and deciding to put a shift in. I don't think they didn't last season. I think the managers got them playing to their strengths, and that's great. Um, but you do have good players. There is a squad. I predicted you for the playoffs last season, and you were kind of you could. I still think you could have made a fist of that for a long time because the middle of the pack didn't sort of it changed around. No one really did much. It was only the top end that really sort of split away the top 4 or 5 teams. So you got the players to do this. I mean, Gab Sutton famously, didn't he, predicted you for the top of the tree, and his logic, in a sense, makes sense. You've got those players, and people are saying, yeah, but they didn't do anything last season. But that's kind of irrelevant because form is a thing. Form is temporary, class is permanent. As was it Liverpool banner? I can never remember, but the old saying. And if you get someone to harness the quality that's there, then they can turn it on. So I think it's always there. The problem you've got is the youth element, which is both brilliant because there's potential to constantly improve, but also the potential for, inconsistency, etc. So I don't see any reason why you can't at least continue in a similar vein. Like I say, I think if anything, the worry or the worry that the bigger shock I'm more shocked by the way you finished last season, but than by the way you've started this one, if that makes sense. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between, but closer to what you're doing now. I think you are a very quality squad, and it's down to the manager to whatever to get the best out of the players you've got. So yeah, it is surprising, but I think less surprising than how rank you were at the end of last season.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree actually, 100%. I changed this question this season, and it's if there was ever a benefit to Jack Clark being sold, which there wasn't very many of them, it was that not everyone's going to answer Jack Clark to this question. But if you could take any player from Sunderland and put it in your team, who would it be and why?
See, I always answer these. I think there's a bit of undiagnosed autism going on with me because I've got three autistic kids, and so I hear these questions, and rather than just take them as I have to be like serious. I'm like, do you mean literally with the squad we've got now? And like, who
Yes.
would I fit in, or just who do I like?
Who would you fit in? So like literally if you were like you get one free transfer from Sunderland, you can have maybe like to fit into the
I
team you
would
got at the moment.
I would take Luke O'Nine as much as Trey Hume is. I just love him. I would take Luke O'Nine because we need someone who can play DM, do a little bit going forward, step in between the centre backs if necessary. And Luke O'Nine is one of those players who I think is probably stymied by his ability to do several things, and gets asked to do different things. But I think he would be a very competent central midfielder to play a lot. He would fit in that role next to Adam Randall for us and absolutely solidify what we're trying to do there, in the build up that the system that Rooney's got going on. I think that you could talk about your Jobs or whatever, but we've got attacking, we got wingers, and we've just brought in an attacking midfielder, but we desperately need someone of that skill set, of that sort of those attributes, to add some steel, some legs, some nous, some speed of thought in the middle. I know
Really
that's not
hope.
necessarily where he's deployed for you guys, but I think he would do that for us.
As always, predictions. I don't think I've got any right this year, so that kind of stands to reason. I think, you know what, 2-1 Sunderland, but it does feel like a bit of a game where things could go stupid for some reason. Just because you're a Sunderland fan, you half expect that sometimes, that things aren't going to be perfect forever.
Yeah, I predicted we've got like a little prediction competition going on, and the loser has to do a forfeit at the end of the season. And spoiler for anyone who wants to know what I predicted, I predicted a 3-0 Sunderland win for this one. I just worry, I think it's too early for Rami Al Haj to be getting us good going forward. You've conceded 1 in 4. So I don't think that we are gonna. I don't think we're gonna score. I just don't think. I think it's too early for that, and I don't think we've gonna have addressed any of the defensive frailties that we've got. And you guys are hotter than a steaming pile of the proverbial at the minute. So I think you're going to score. I don't think we will. It could be anything between 1-0, 3-0, 4-0, to be honest, but I'm going to go for 3-0.
Ben, thanks so much for joining. I'll be on your podcast, which will be linked in the description if you're on Twitter and stuff like that or whatnot. But thanks for joining me. Always a pleasure to catch up. Now we'll go and do the other thing and pretend that we haven't just done this.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Cheers.